Hey everybody, welcome to the Private Club Radio Show podcast, the industry's choice for news, trends, updates, and conversations all in the world of private golf and country clubs. Whether you are brand new to the industry or a consummate professional, welcome. We are glad you are here. I'm your host, Denny Corby. Welcome. This is the show where we go over any and all topics related to private golf and country clubs. I am stoked. I am excited for this episode. I get to chat with LuAnn Giovannelli, who is a hoot, an amazing woman. She is GM, COO of Bay Colony Community Association. In our chat, we go over a lot of things. We talk and go deep on a lot of facets of club management, of the club industry. We talk about the challenges and things that she's faced in the evolution of working in the industry over the years, being a strong leader, female general manager. A big part of what we talk about is the importance of authenticity and not being afraid to admit when you don't know something. One of LuAnn's mantras and one of the great mantras she shared with us in the show is, and one that she lives by is, there's no right way to do the wrong thing. There's no right way to do the wrong thing. And just a lot of good advice for professionals, industry professionals, young and old. A lot of focus on the young professionals in the industry and really encouraging them to be authentic and honest in their work. I think that's really important because when it comes down to it, a club, a board, they're hiring you, the manager, and they want to make sure that you and your authentic self matches with the club's authentic self and their culture and their place. And we get to use one of my favorite words, which not too many people know about, PETA. One of the coolest things that I learned is LuAnn and her husband drag race. They have dragsters. And we learn about how and what drag racing has to do with club management. It's a great episode. Private Club Radio listeners, let's welcome to the show, LuAnn Giovannelli. One of the first female GMs in the country.
Yes, actually, that means I'm an old person, but, yeah, I think I was thinking about this. I think I got my first GM job in the late 80s, maybe. And there were very few of us in the association. There may have been more in the country that we weren't aware of, but in the association, there were very, very few of us. I can remember going to a Florida chapter meeting and there were 3 women and all men, so. Yeah, it was interesting. I always joke and say the lines are longer now at the ladies' room, which is such a bummer, but it's not a bummer, really. It's really wonderful to see all the women in club management now, but yeah.
What was it like in the 80s?
Well, honestly, when you went to any kind of a CMAA event, it was just all predominantly men. And I was blessed because I went to my first chapter meeting with a gentleman who actually my stepdad had worked for, which is a whole other story. But J.D. Pietro, Bill Wagner, Jim Singerling, some of the guys that were just icons in the industry kind of shepherded me and said, hey, we want to help you succeed in the industry. And they really did. They were always there for me as a sounding board and to kind of give me a push or kick me in the butt, and say, you need to move. So I was really lucky in that regard, so I didn't feel that, that I was isolated at all in any way. And we hear that sometimes now. That I didn't feel that, the gentlemen in the association were very supportive of me and really, really pushed me into growth. So, yeah, but it was different.
Yeah.
You're the only woman, you learn to be, I always say, well, you learn man speak and you learn to be one of the boys. And, that's how you evolve in the industry. And I think those of us who started way back when all feel that, we were one of the boys.
Yeah. It must have had some thick skin because I'm sure you've probably heard and seen things and experienced things that, the average person, let alone female, just anybody could have just easily just pivoted, turned, whether you're male or female or not. Just, hospitality could be a tough industry as well. So that had to be, you probably had to have some tough skin, had to walk through or handle some situations with your head high.
Sure. And I mean, I think where I saw that most was in the boardroom, because I was dealing with, and still do deal with, older gentlemen who are captains of industry and in, very tough industries themselves. So they didn't pull any punches. They didn't soft soap things just because I was a woman.
Yeah.
And I think we all feel that. But so, there were some days when you just had to have a stiff upper lip, and, you know, the old never let them see a sweat thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, you learn that way though. I mean, I learned some hard lessons. You learn never to, it's okay to say, hey, I don't know, and come back later. And you learn some lessons growing up in an environment like that with gentlemen that have really been in tough industry, and there's tough cookies.
Yeah, no, that had to be a big move in their eyes too, to have someone, where you could have easily just said yes to something, and we're like, I'm not sure. Can I go back? Can I double check? To then, kind of put your hand up and go like, time out. Let me go back, do my research. Let me ask them more questions. Like, I'm sure they probably respected that also, assuming that you would just say yes, or just, can comply when it's like, oh wait, no, I need some clarification. I need to do a little bit of research. I have to go back and check on that.
Well, some of my best teachers were my board members, and some of those, men that I worked for over time. And, two of them really stand out. A gentleman named Don Early, who worked for General Electric, who always said, LuAnn, make a decision, whether it's wrong, just make a decision. Don't do paralysis analysis, he always called
Ooh.
it. And, so he taught me that. And then there was another gentleman who basically said, hey, you're not going to have all the answers, so don't pretend that you do. People will respect you more. So, I mean, I think I was blessed in really meeting some wonderful people who were vested in my success. They wanted me to succeed. And I think it's really cool that I had men from that era that actually took a chance on a woman, because, it just wasn't heard of at that time. And when I would go for interviews, I would usually go thinking, well, I'm not going to get this job because I'm a woman, so I really appreciate those men that took the chance and said, she can do this job for us.
Yeah, that's really cool. Were you always in clubs? How'd you even get into clubs?
That's a funny story.
No, were clubs before or after drag racing?
Oh, before, way before. So my stepdad actually was a superintendent and built courses in Pennsylvania. And one of the courses that he built was a links course for the Rockwell family at Nemacolin Hunting Reserve, which is now, I think it's called Nemacolin Woodlands. And I worked in the business office when I was in high school. And then I worked in the inn, which was a little, it was an inn where corporations actually came for retreats all the time. Well, the gentleman that was the GM there, his name was Bob Rhodes. And, Bob taught me a lot about the industry. I never really had any interest in doing it for a living. I was going to school to be a psychology major. And then I followed the love of my life to Florida in the mid 80s. And I was working for a tax accountant and tending bar at a country club, just to kind of get through school and do some stuff till I decided what I wanted to be when I grew up. Well, I'm looking at the reservation book and I see the name Bob Rhodes. And I'm thinking, what are the odds that this is the guy, right? So I called the number, and sure enough, it was the guy. So he said, hey, you have to come and work for me. He was managing the Yacht and Country Club in Stuart, Florida. And I said, well, what's the job, Bob? And he said, well, I need a food and beverage director. And I said, I don't know anything about that. I mean, if anything, the only thing I knew about was golf course stuff. And he's like, no, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. So I quit both of my jobs to go work for Bob. And when I got there, there wasn't a job. I mean, there was no job. He was going to create the job, but it hadn't really been vetted by the board. I mean, it was just a crazy situation. And I was like, great, now what do I do? Right. So I went to work for him. I ended up working in the business office. I ran the dining room. I did, you name it, I did it. Right. And I worked my way up in the club and I became the assistant GM. He ended up getting terminated, and they brought in a consultant, a gentleman, Ken McQuaid. He was the GM at the Knickerbocker Club in New York City, just the most amazing guy. He's gone now, but we remained friends forever. He was there to evaluate me to see if I could actually do the job. right? And he recommended that I get the job. Well, then I get the job and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to do this. I mean, I cried. I went home and to my husband, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. It's such a huge commitment. You work a lot, you trade holidays and, your life, I always said, for the job. And my husband was actually the one who pushed me and said, you're so good at this. You just have to do this. And the rest is history. So it was just like this crazy chain of events from my childhood, really, until, my early mid 20s that I fell into it. And I did fall in love with it. And then I met people like Jay and Bill and Jim and, other people in the industry. And they just kind of kept pushing me along. And, I love it. I can't imagine doing anything else for a living. I can't.
Do you ever dip back into any of your psychological or psychology trainings and stuff? Because I'm sure all that definitely came into place and helped, whether you know it or not, in some capacity, especially dealing with boards and people and, just how people
Sure.
think.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And of course you learn things as you get older too, just about people in general. But yeah, absolutely. It came into play a time or two, no doubt about that.
I remember when we first chatted, you said the line, "You've watched the evolution of everything."
Mm.
I like
Yeah.
that line a lot.
Yeah, I feel like I have. I mean, it's not like I'm the beginning of club management, but I certainly have watched the evolution of women in club management and the evolution of the no, I don't want to say kids, the students and the generations that we're dealing with now, and how things have changed. In my day, we worked 70, 80 hours a week. We felt like that was expected of us. You had to do that to prove that you were really good at what you do. And I kind of really love it that the young people today are like, hey, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not doing that. And there are a lot of people that think, oh, they don't have a work ethic or they don't have this or that. And I think, heck, why didn't we think of that? Why didn't we say, hey, we're not working 80 hours a week? We want to be with our family. We want to go. I don't have children, but I see people not being able to go to their children's events and sporting events, because they feel like they have to be at the club. So I'm kind of, I think it's cool that the younger people today are going, hey, I need a life. But, I've also watched the evolution of boards and clubs where they're not so rigid about, hey, we want our GM in the dining room every night. You have that old maitre d' syndrome, I call it. So clubs and people in clubs and boards and the next generation, I mean, all of it has evolved into what I hope will continue to be a much more balanced life experience. So, I mean, it's not like you can take every holiday off, but, you can at least alternate. My staff here, when we have holidays, my beach club manager does a shift in the early day and a shift in night. So you get to at least experience that holiday with your staff. I mean, with your family, and you have a little bit of life balance. But it is interesting. I mean, right down to how we dress and how we wear our hair. I can remember my hair used to be very, very long, and I used to wear it in a bun every day of my life because that was the expectation. You had to have a suit on, and you had to have your hair in a bun, and you had to, and stockings and, all that craziness. So, and now I never wear my hair up. I wouldn't even think about it. And my members don't have that expectation that I have to look like, you know, a librarian. No, nothing against librarians, but you get it. I mean, that whole like persona. So, and even the way we dress, everybody doesn't wear the suit and every single day. You can be a little more casual. So I think it's all evolved into a more casual and life balance kind of situation. So that's a good
How do
thing.
you how do you handle your staff? So like, your staff comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that," for lack of better words. How do you handle and work with your team, and how do you find that balance for everybody? Um,
Well, I mean, we have multiple departments here, but we set the expectation when they're hired. This is the expectation that we need you to work these days, X number of hours, holidays, weekends, whatever, and we will do our best to give you time off whenever you'd like to. And, all of our department heads are super flexible with that, to even to the extent where my security director will work a shift for one of his guys if they really need to be somewhere. So I think we all have recognized that it's important to give our staff, that time. And that doesn't always happen. I mean, there's lots of times when we say, gee, just can't do it. But they also know that deep down we're flexible and we care about them. So, we will if we can. So I think initially we just set the expectation and do what we can as we go.
Did you purposely stay in a lot of yacht clubs, or did that just sort of happen along the way?
It just happened. It just happened. And, they all had golf as well. So, some of it was yacht, some of it was golf. It was all predominantly golf until I went to Cherokee. I managed the Cherokee Town Club for a year. And now I'm in an HOA, which is like, I died and went to heaven because it's it's a Monday through Friday job, even though I have a beach club and a tennis club. It's a very different animal than managing a country club. So it's fun.
What are some of the main differences?
Well, when you're managing a property owners association, you're really dealing with people and their homeowners issues. So, putting a new roof on your house or painting your house, or I want this tree removed from my backyard, or, my neighbor's doing something I don't like, so you're really dealing with homeowner issues versus, a golf course, or, I am ultimately responsible for my tennis club and beach club, but I have amazing people in those positions. So they really run those. And I get to, I get to do the fun part of talking to people and, walking around and smiling a lot. So it's just different. I miss the country club industry. I really miss golf a lot of the time because I did that for 30 years, but still great job.
Do not judge me. No one judge me. So I just find the funny in everything. So one of my favorite things to do, I don't do it all the time, but if I specifically know I'm in like a HOA, so if I'm going to performing a club somewhere and I see people like out doing stuff around their like yards or just house, because I'm in my rental car, so I'll slow down and I'll roll down the window and I'll just yell, "I'm calling the HOA," and then just drive away. It is so much fun.
I love it.
It is just to see their face, like, what am I doing? Like, it is the look of panic is just amazing.
That's awesome. I wish I could do that, but I am the HOA that they call. So,
did you know what you were getting into when you went from club management to the HOA?
Well, I thought I did, right? So I thought, oh, how different can this be? Management is management. I knew there was a beach club and a tennis club. I really wasn't ready for sort of the dialing back of time commitment. And I also wasn't ready. There aren't very many committees here, and they're all people that were really in corporate America. So I was used to people emailing me constantly or texting me or somebody calling me. And, so it was constant after I went home at night, weekends, whatever. So when I first got here, like nobody ever talked to me. They didn't talk to me. They didn't email me. They didn't text me. It was like, oh, wow, they don't like me. That was my initial like, oh,
ooh, I
they
didn't
don't
think
like
about
me,
that.
right? And so the gentleman who hired me, I finally, he called me one day and I said, look, I have to ask you, like nobody ever really communicates with me here. And I'm used to a lot of communication. And he said, gee, LuAnn, we hired you to manage the association. We don't want to talk to you. So basically it was kind of like, and I loved it. It was my wake up call for like, oh yeah. Okay, great. They trust me. They just want me to do my job and I don't have to deal with this anymore. So that probably took me a good year to kind of get used to people not talking to me all the time. And the other thing was I kept trying to make the HOA like my country club. I kept trying to do events like the big party, the big dance, the big everything. And I kept trying to initiate these events that I had always had at my country clubs and in my golf club life. And at some point went, wow, they hate this. They just don't like it, you know? And there were people that were forthright enough to say to me, this is our private restaurant. We just want to come here and have dinner. We don't want to dance. We don't want to do this, you know? So that was another year, you know, of me going, oh, this is a whole different world, you know? So once I kind of settled into
Yeah.
the differences of what I had done for 30 years, you know, versus what I was now doing. It was fine and it's great. And we do still have entertainment and we still do some events every year. We have a great event planner here. But it mainly revolves around the holidays when everyone has their family and their grandkids here. And, you know, we do a lot of stuff at Christmas for the kids. We do a lot of stuff at Easter, you know. So we do still do events. But that was the hard transition for me, was to give up, you know, the old life. You know, it was like shedding a skin. I was giving up that old life and, you know, doing something new.
Yeah. How did this position come about? Were they looking for you? Were you looking for something else? What was that progression?
Well, I had actually moved to Atlanta. I was offered the job as the first woman managing the town club at Cherokee Town Club, Town and Country Club, and my husband and I picked up after, you know, 20 something years of living here in Florida and went to Atlanta. And great club, great people. Still keep in touch with that staff. You know, two of the people on that staff I'm very close to still. But we just didn't care for the weather or the traffic, or, you know, it was not for me. And so unfortunately, I moved my husband back to Florida in a year. But I contacted a friend of mine who was, you know, someone who did placements, and he
Yeah.
had two jobs that he sent me on. One was at Cat Cay Island in the Bahamas, and the other one was Bay Colony. And, you know, I guess luckily I did not get the Cat Cay job, even though it was a really cool place. And I think my husband would have liked that much better than I did. But I was just lucky. I got this job, and the rest is history. I've been here for 11 years, which, you know, time has flown by.
That's great. And well, I mean, you've most of your places you've had good tenures. And speaking of tenures, most of them have been for about 10 years. Okay. So
I know, right? It's time. So the interesting thing is I worked at three of my clubs twice. So if you look at my resume, you'll see I went
I thought
back and
I
forth,
thought I
right?
was I thought I was mis-scrolling. I thought it
No,
was like my page. Was it?
no, it's not. I actually worked at three clubs, two different times, right? So I had accumulated more years because I did work at them multiple times. But um,
There's something to be said about that. You must have really made a good impact to, because I mean, there's oftentimes, people don't even want to go near the same city that they've, managed a club in, and you for, 3 for 3 been brought back. That's pretty amazing.
it was interesting. You know, there are some people who go, "Wow, that's kind of psycho," but there are lots of circumstances about why those things happened at all three different clubs. But
Yeah.
I did love the clubs and the people there, and it was easy to go back. And in one instance, I had gone to another club and was very unhappy. And it was just a fluke, that the president called and said, "Hey, are you happy? Because we really want you to come back here."
Stop it.
And I jumped. I mean, I didn't even tell my husband. I'm like, yes, I'm coming back. So uh, different circumstances for all three, but no
Yeah.
regrets. It is an interesting thing to do. Because you leave for a reason, right? You're
Mhm.
either another job or you're not particularly happy, and then you go back, and things have changed somewhat, but there are always those same things that you remember about why you left as well.
Yeah.
So, would I recommend it? Yes, under certain circumstances, but it doesn't always work.
I'm sure there must have been some checks and balances in place, and some good, bad columns, and
Sure.
all
Yeah,
that stuff.
sure.
It's 2024, and it's time to change the way you vet your new members. Some traditions are worth modifying, The new member process hasn't changed really in the past 150 years, relying almost solely on social relationships and casual interactions, but lacking in factual data. And this is where Kennis comes in, because the traditional application process tells you very little about someone's behaviors and character until now. Kennis has created an innovative and confidential, comprehensive applicant information gathering process that provides an unraveled depth of information. The world of member vetting has evolved to a new standard, and Kennis is your turnkey solution to meet this new industry best practice. You can rely on Kennis to provide the facts that you need to make fully educated member decisions, because what you don't know can hurt your club and your members. To learn a little bit more or to set up a call, head on over to membervetting.com, fill out the form. You're going to have a chat with Paul Dank. It's going to be good. He's a great guy. Also, be sure to check out our episodes of Member Vetting here on Private Club. If you're looking for a way for your club to help attract the right members, stand out from the crowds, and you don't want to advertise, but you want more exposure in the marketplace, then you need to check out Golf Life Navigators. They are the only resource that helps golfers discover, experience, and ultimately secure their ideal club membership and golf community home. They're experts at connecting your club with people who will truly appreciate what you have to offer. It's like eHarmony meets Zillow for golfers. If you're interested in learning more, head on over to golflifenavigators.com. You've been doing this for so long. What are some, and you've had great mentors, you've had great people who've pushed you and shared, things, success traits with you along the way. What are some things that you may have learned from, Bob back in the day, or maybe it was, back in high school, working in the business office? Was there anything that you've learned early on that stuck with you? Mantras, sayings, any little bits of business that just kept with you that, maybe even stuff that you were told earlier that people, that didn't really click until you got a little bit older?
Well, I think early on, I love this expression, and I don't know where it came from, certainly not mine, but there's no right way to do the wrong thing. And I learned that pretty early on from a gentleman that I worked for at my first club. It's like, and there was a perfect example of that at that club, where it may be easy to do something, but if it's not the right thing, don't do it. So, that has always stuck with me. And just being yourself, you have to be authentic, and that took me a little while to learn, because as a young woman in the industry, I think early on I thought, oh, this is how they want me to act, so this is how I should act. And it did take me a while after working with some of the men that I worked with on boards to go, hey, I can be myself, and I can be myself with this guy, then I can be myself with everyone. So that takes a while. But, I think being authentic is always very important.
What do you tell young professionals now who are looking to get into the industry? What do you tell them? What are your words of wisdom? What are your, words to the wise? What are your 2 cents?
Well, back to a lot of things we've talked about today, be authentic. Don't be afraid to say you don't know. Don't BS people. They see it coming. They know it, whenever you're not telling the truth, or I call it dancing, so, those are some big ones, but I think my own mantra of no right way to do the wrong thing. I hope that sticks with a lot of the people that I've mentored and talked to on a regular basis, because, it's easy to fall into that trap of not doing the right thing because it's easy.
Very, very. Now, what if, you're chatting with a club professional and they're a known PETA? How do they change that about them?
A peer or a member?
No, they are no. I was kidding. I was saying you're chatting with a club professional who is a known PETA. How do they change that?
PETA?
Pain in the
Pain in the
ass.
ass? Yeah. Okay.
I was trying to make a joke. All right, never mind.
No. Okay, so you might have to edit this or start over again.
I know.
No, how do they change that? I think
No,
I think you're talking about the guy The guy, charge him 50 cents. I forgot I told you that story. Oh my God. Oh, charge them 50 cents every time they come in.
Oh,
That was the
that
greatest story ever.
that
Yeah.
can you tell that story for the audience or
Yeah.
no? Okay.
No, sure. I mean, it was such a long time ago. So there was a member at one of my clubs who shall remain nameless, but let's just call him Quiet Wyatt, right? So he would come to the club every single day for lunch, and he was a little bit difficult to deal with. He was loud, and he would talk over top of everyone, and he wasn't particularly nice to the staff. And one month, he came into the accounting department and said, I don't understand why I have a 50-cent charge on my check every day I come to lunch for pita bread. He said, I don't even like pita bread. And I wish I could imitate him. He had the heaviest Southern accent. And so the accounting department was kind of befuddled, and said, oh, well, you don't eat pita bread? And so they started looking up all the chips and recognized that there was a young man who always waited on him. And, who always waited on him. And so we contacted this young man and said, gee, every time Mr. Quiet Wyatt, comes into the club, you charge him for pita bread. And he said that he doesn't eat pita bread. So what's going on? So this young man kind of put his head down. His face was red. And he said, well, it's a pita charge because he's so difficult to deal with. And we were like, pita charge? Pain in the butt, right? So we didn't know whether to die laughing or reprimand him, So it was kind of one of those moments where you're like, oh, this is really creative, and amazing, but you really shouldn't be doing this to members. So we had to have a little chat with the young man and tell him, this was inappropriate. Obviously, we had to credit every 50-cent pita charge on Quiet Wyatt's bill, but just
Thousands of dollars.
one of the best stories ever. And the young man, actually, I'm still friends with him on Facebook, and every once in a while we have the Quiet Wyatt laugh. But great
That's
story.
amazing.
Yeah. And you couldn't be mad at him. I mean, you just couldn't be mad at him. It was just so perfect.
So good. So good. And just going back to being authentic, I love this. You're big into drag racing. And
Yeah.
not like, not like a Corvette on the strip, like the legit dragsters, like the ones with like the umbrellas, like with the
parachutes.
the
Yeah.
parachutes, right? Like they go that fast.
Yes, it's kind of an interesting story. So I golfed for most of my life since I was 8. I golfed almost every day because we lived on a golf course. My dad maintained golf courses, and in Pennsylvania back in the old days, the superintendent lived on the golf course. So golfed my whole life, loved it. Met my husband. He didn't really particularly like the sport. He loved going out riding on the golf cart because he loves nature, but he didn't like the sport. And he was a barefoot skier. He loved the water. He had jet boats. He was always on the water. I hate the water. I'm absolutely terrified on the water, unless it's going putt slow, right? So we did not have hobbies that worked. We just didn't like each other's hobbies. So we did love the sport of drag racing. And so we would go to lots of national events and go to local events. And in 2004, we were at an event and my husband said, gee, you know what? I really would like to get a dragster and drag race. Meanwhile, neither of us had ever done this. And I'm like, okay. So he got a dragster and we were going to the drag strip. He was racing. I was the tire checker girl, putting the gas in, doing the tires. And after a couple of years, I was like, this stinks. I want my own car. I want to drive. So he gave me his car and he of course got a faster car. So we both have rail dragsters and that's what we do for a hobby. So I gave up golf. He gave up water skiing and we now both drag race. So fun.
So what's your fastest 0 to 60?
0 we do quarter mile.
Quarter mile.
So, when they actually don't do quarter mile anymore, they do eighth. But when we were doing the quarter mile, it was my car does about 190 in 6.9 seconds. So his is a little faster than mine. I think he does 210 in 6 seconds. I can't remember what his does, but mine's, yeah. So fun. And I will tell you, when you first start, it's an out of body experience. When I used to come back to the pit in the early days, he would say, "So how did that feel? What about this? What about that?" I'm like, "Are you kidding? I didn't even remember anything that happened in that 6 seconds." But the more you do it, the slower it becomes. You start seeing people in the stands, and you start seeing all kinds of stuff. So initially it feels very fast, and then the more you do it, I understand why people want to go faster and faster, because after a while it doesn't feel fast anymore. But
how many times, like do you go more than like one? Like when you go, how many times do you run?
Well, it depends. So there's nights when you go and it's called test and tune, and you just run your car as many times as you can, depending on how many cars are at the track. Now, if you're actually racing, you end up in a 16 car bracket usually, sometimes 32, and then it's, every race there's a loser.
Yeah.
So, it depends. It depends on how well you do. I've never won a race, if that's what you're going to ask me next.
Oh, maybe
And
if you had the faster car.
Maybe, and it's not uncommon. I mean, it's, we always laugh and say second place is the first loser, but it's just fun. It's just such an adrenaline rush.
Well, and that's got to stink because you're both going so fast. You're losing by like what, milliseconds? Like what's even the
thousands of a
second?
Yeah,
Like
thousands of a second.
Oh,
yeah,
man. So if you can describe that feeling of like racers and then like the lights go like bang, because it's what, yellow, green, or how's
it depends on the light, but yeah, yellow, green, and you don't want it to be red. It's just like you're so amped up and tense and ready to go, and it's actually, you have a trans button, so you lift that button and then you just push your foot to the floor and your car launches. And I mean, when I say launch, it launches. So it's an out of body experience. It is. And I would say, even though you get used to going fast and you don't feel that rush of going fast anymore, that launch off the starting line never changes. I mean, that's always just an incredible, like, wow, every time you do it.
Well, how many G's is that G-force? That's G-forces that hold you back?
Yeah,
right?
but in my car, I can't tell you. I mean, I know in the big cars that go 340 miles an hour, the G's are like fighter pilot jets, so those are real G's. I'm sure I have a G. I don't know what it is. It's not like that.
Oh man, that must be such like a good like release too, of just being able to just because you can't think about anything else really in that moment. You have to be in on it. It's not like you can, like, your brain can't wander. So that's got to be a nice way to just zone in and focus and be hyper vigilant.
It really is, and it is a stress reliever. It's just like you said, you really can't think of anything else either. So.
Thank you. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on. I truly appreciate it. This has been such a fun conversation.
Thank you so much, Denny. It's been my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Hope you all enjoyed that episode. I know I did. If you're enjoying the content, like, share, subscribe. That's this episode. Until next time, catch you on the flippity flip.